The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Update on Rashee Rice is he's still going to miss time, but it's going to be a little bit later than we thought.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Rashee Rice has a date. A judge has set a date of September 30th. There's still an arbitration thing that can happen, but if the legal system follows and there's no arbitration reached before that, we should have an answer on September 30th of what the legal system is going to do, and therefore what the league is going to do. So a lot later than we thought it was going to be, right? We all were kind of working towards September 1st before the first game. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. Chris, where do you land on it?
I think it's really interesting that they have put this as September 30th, and I think that there are so many different things that can happen. And right now we think it's going to be September 30th, so we think he's going to play the first 4 weeks of the season. We will see whether or not that ends up being the case. And the other part of the reality is it could be the entire season for all we know at this point, because the reality is that the last time this judge actually tried a case, she took a couple of weeks to make a decision and then it was appealed. So it could be something that's pushed back even further if it gets to the judge. How this is going to play out is going to be anybody's guess. The one thing I will say is, as it sits right now, it looks like Rashee Rice will be available for the Chargers game. And to me, that's huge news for Kansas City for multiple different reasons. Obviously, it's huge because they need the player, and we can talk about that. But I think it actually, especially when you're talking about preseason games, I think it puts 2 players on notice right now on the Chiefs roster that have to make a name for themselves this week and next week.
Yeah, like it is go time for those guys. We'll name them in just a moment. But before we go, I think we disagree on the impact of what this game does. Assume that it's either a 4 or 6 week suspension and it doesn't come down to 30th and it plays out there. What was your take on the schedule? Because mine was pretty straightforward. I care about the Bills game because I think that could come down to seeding very, very effectively.
No, and I understand where you're coming from on that. I guess I just look at it as they haven't beat the Bills. They're 1-4 against the Bills and Josh Allen in Mahomes' tenure in the regular season. And you're right, it could cost them the wild card. I'm not saying it's not important. What I am saying is I'm not going to worry about him missing the Bills game near as much because they generally haven't won against the Bills. And they generally, honestly, in some games, I would say I don't think that they were trying to lose, but I don't really think that they were specifically trying to win either.
I just hope that it doesn't come down to Rashee missing that and that being something that the game turns on, which I think that it would, because I think it's going to be tighter this year. And I do think that the Bills are the next best team in the AFC. I think it could come down to that ballgame.
It could. And if it comes down to that ball game and they lose and they are the wild card, they're the wild card. They've done it before. They can get back to the Super Bowl as a wild card. Kansas City plays Buffalo differently in the regular season than they do in the postseason. And when I said that I don't know that they've been trying to play to win, I'm not trying to say they're trying to lose. I do think that they figure out what is going to work against this Bills team this specific year, and they use that game as probably more of a preseason-esque type game to an extent to try some things out, to try to get ready for a game that they figure they're going to play in the playoffs and they have to win, because it has almost always been one of those situations where they've lost in the regular season and they beat them in the playoffs. So it's a different scenario. Obviously, Mahomes elevates his game. And really quick, I keep hearing you say this is the 9th season of us doing this. How crazy is it that we've been here doing this the entire time Mahomes has been in the NFL?
Yeah. There's something to be said for good timing, and I think we had it. So kudos to David Locke, our fearless leader, and the network in general. Now, taking advantage of that in this particular week is across the board. And we talked about the tight ends in particular. I do think somebody's got to step up there, and I think I know who I want it to be. But the wide receivers with Hollywood, I think they're just going to nurse this injury until the regular season, and they're just not going to attempt it. With Rice, he needs to play this week because he needs to make sure that those first 4 weeks, if it really does go to September 30th, are as much as they possibly can be, right? For not just for the team, but for himself. But they also have to prepare other guys to take those reps once he does get to the suspension time. Who is most keen for you this week in preseason game number 2?
Tyquan Thornton and Nico Remigio. And I honestly think everything that we've talked about for the past couple of weeks since the first Rice news came out and we thought that he's going to get suspended for the first part of the season was that there was going to be 7 wide receivers and he was going to go on the suspension list. Now that's not an option. So to me, it's a matter of, do they risk putting Nico Remigio and cutting him, thinking that they can put him on the practice squad and bring him up to be a returner for a couple of weeks because they want to keep Tyquan Thornton on the roster because they know Rice is going to be gone and Thornton's going to give them more value than Remigio while Rice is gone.
On the offense. Yeah, it's
Right.
a debate about offense versus special teams and who can help you now, and in particular, who can help you the most during those weeks of suspension. And this is probably the worst case scenario for the Chiefs in terms of trying to get to their 53-man roster initially for the season, because now they have to have Rashee Rice on it unless something else changes. We don't know. There are settlements that could happen between the NFL and the NFLPA and the judge, et cetera. There's still a process there, but we're planning for it as it is. And so I agree with you. I think honestly right now it feels like the coaching staff is leaning outside of Dave Toub towards the offensive input rather than the special teams input.
Yeah, and the question is do you think he would lose Nico if you put him on the practice, if you try to get him on the practice squad?
Yes.
And it's I agree. I think that you would, and it's not necessarily because I think he's great at the wide receiver position, but he has shown he is competent at returner, and that is a position that is few and far between in the NFL that can do it and do it well. So I think that they risk losing him if they put him on the practice squad. And this might also end up being in a scenario where you have to keep 7 wide receivers on the roster, which completely changes your math at other positions.
It may be. And I will tell you this. There are teams in this league that would bring him in to return kicks, but he would have a much better shot at getting on the offensive field for a different team.
August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Perhaps you believe in the Green Bay Packers, that they would win Super Bowl 59, or maybe you have some division winner dark horses you'd like to parlay. Visit the FanDuel Sportsbook app and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game.
Haas Haney is still the second fastest Cowboy in the entire Oklahoma State roster. And yes, he evidently still competing to not be QB2.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys.
Whenever you have a quarterback battle, that is going to grab a lot of headlines. And yes, people have sent me some things about an Oklahoma reporter, News Channel 5 or 9, something to that effect, was discussing how the intel he's getting and the information that he's receiving is that Haas Haney is in fact going to be the day one starter against UT Martin. And that very well may be the case, right? To my knowledge, it was Haas Haney and Garrett Rangel splitting reps in the spring, and then coming into the fall, Haas Haney was QB1, and up until this previous Sunday, he was continuing to be QB1. They gave Zane an opportunity this previous Sunday, and it appeared as though that Zane was likely to hold on to that spot. But evidently, there's some stuff matriculating out there that Haas Haney is not only still in contention, but perhaps he's jumped back above Zane for that coveted QB1 position. Regardless of whom is going to take the first snaps against UT Martin on the 28th, we've known about the Zane train. The Zane train has been a thing for quite some time now, and it's been building steam, right? Pun intended. But behind him, we didn't know what we were going to get in Haas Haney. All we knew that he was super fast and he was super athletic and he had crazy movement out in the open field. Then we were able to put it into context and going over some of the top times from their high school days, and even some of them that had some of the miles per hour and 40 times at their previous schools if they were to transfer in. And that led us to believe that Haas Haney was either going to be the fastest or the second fastest player on the roster. Turns out he is still the second fastest, but there's an adjustment to who's number one. We'll save some of that for segment 2. But the Haas Haney package that I saw the best by far on social media came from Nick the Geek on X. He said this should be the Haas sauce package, and I completely agree. So if you have the same train rolling into town, you can sprinkle in some Haas sauce anytime you need some extra yardage, short yardage, red zone situations. No matter what, and no matter who takes the first snap this season, I think Oklahoma State fans should feel pretty comfortable, because if Haas Haney is in fact going to be the dude that takes the first snaps and maybe inevitably ends up being the primary guy as opposed to Zane Flores, that means he absolutely earned it, right? There's a reason that the Oklahoma State coaching staff decided to choose Zane Flores and Haas Haney over the retention of Garrett Rangel and Milwaukee Smith, both of whom showed in the previous season that they were more capable in a multitude of areas over somebody like an Alan Bowman. But regardless, the Zane train has had this name for quite some time because the excitement level has been continuously building, right? I always point to one of my last conversations with Leon Johnson in regards to why did you want to come back to Oklahoma State for that extra redshirt year so bad? And he kept saying, because I'm going to play with Zane. That dude is special. The way he goes about his business, the way he throws the ball, the way he can understand the playbook. He was saying that Zane Flores is just a different cat. That's why he was really excited to come back for an additional year. So ever since then, my Zane train interest had been piqued. And then naturally, when they decided to bring in Haas Haney and Garrett primarily compete at QB1 in the spring, and then Haas enters fall as QB1, only to potentially give some way to Zane Flores along the way, to now potentially the fact that he may have catapulted himself back above the Zane. Here's the deal, regardless. From my understanding, right, Haas is a gamer. Haas is a J.W. Walsh style absolute dude. The only real difference between him and Zane, other than the size factor, right, Zane being 6'3", 220 pounds, is Haas had a propensity at times to scramble around and kind of rush his decision-making and kind of put the ball up in a slightly precarious situation. And Zane evidently was doing that a little bit less, which is why he was given some more QB1 opportunities as of this previous week. But from this previous Monday until now, obviously things could have very much changed. And I think that's a great sign for Oklahoma State. No matter who wins the job, no matter who takes the first snaps, no matter who ends up with the most snaps there towards the end of the season, I think it does make the most amount of sense that there's going to be some semblance of a 2-quarterback system, at least for the first couple of weeks. And some of this could very well be that, there's some gamesmanship happening. Like, no disrespect to UT Martin, but UT Martin lost a decent number of their top players from this previous season. So the team that won 4 straight conference titles is probably not the same UT Martin that unfortunately is going to begin their season in Stillwater, Oklahoma. So maybe whoever starts game 1 is systematically not going to start game 2. I have no idea. As it pertains to the exact who's going to take the first snaps and who's going to take the snaps in game 2, I don't know. But I do know that it makes sense that both of these dudes play. And I also think that it makes a ton of sense that we try to give Oregon something that they cannot take into consideration before that game, right? So whether it be different wrinkles from the play calling system or different alignments that we want Oregon to pay a little bit extra attention to, whether it be packaging or the individual dudes, at the end of the day, what matters is if Haas Haney is QB1 in Stillwater, America, that means a considerable amount because the staff has been extremely high on Zane Flores the entire time. And again, they didn't go with the quote-unquote safe picks. I'm not saying that Garrett Rangel, Milwaukee Smith were 7 to 8 win dudes, but it seems as though the coaching staff kind of felt that way. And they kind of felt like Zane Flores and Haas Haney have higher ceilings. So Zane Flores and Haas Haney could potentially get Oklahoma State in that 9 to 10 win category. The more I hear about practice, the more I hear about the intensity and the fact that they're having to compete for their spots and compete for jobs and compete to even be on the roster. Because if you're not doing what you're supposed to do and you're not showing it out on the football field, you can be designated as a DSA. And if you're a DSA, then you don't have, automatic scholarships and things of that nature. So there is a system in Stillwater that if you do not do what you're supposed to do on a daily basis and also take care of business on the football field, that you could get bumped down to a very sketchy spot, no matter where you came from and how much you're getting paid. And I think that's going to be more visible than anywhere at the quarterback position. Both of these dudes were very sought after. Both of these dudes could have gone almost anywhere to have a transfer portal moment or even coming out of high school. But they chose to stay at Oklahoma State. The coaching staff chose to ride into 2025 100% on them. They took out the safe plays in Garrett Rangel and Malawake Smith, and they decided to go for the higher ceiling. But this has been a Zane Frame thing happening for quite some time now. So if Haas Haney does, in fact, leapfrog Zane once again, that's because he absolutely 100% earned it. And that's what has me the most excited. I don't necessarily care who takes the first snaps, because at the end of the day, they're both going to play probably a decent amount against UT Martin, and they're both going to provide some things that is specifically designed to give Oregon some extra eye candy. Whether we're actually going to implement it or use it or completely get rid of it, that's the point, is Oregon's not going to know either. So we could have Oregon preparing for maybe Haas Haney and Rodney Fields, and then we could show up and they roll out Zane Flores and Trent Howland or Zane Flores and Caleb Hicks. I mean, they could even get really creative and bring both of them into the fold. I think that would be phenomenal. And Zane did play RB3. I know I bring this up all the time. He was the official depth chart RB3 last spring after a couple of running back injuries. You don't put somebody at that spot if you don't think he can at least be somewhat competent about giving the defense a decent look. So the idea of having Haas Haney and Zane Flores and Sam Jackson V, who was a quarterback at TCU, a quarterback at Cal, then he switched to wide receiver at Auburn. I mean, you go back and look some of his highlights. Some of his better highlights as a quarterback at TCU was unfortunately against Oklahoma State, where I think he put up like 250, 260-ish, 100 yards against the Cowboys as a QB. So that would be a fun package to have. If you look in the backfield, you got Haas Haney, Zane Flores, and Sam Jackson V. You don't know what's coming. And if you were to sprinkle some Gavin Freeman into that equation as well, or Caleb Hicks, or Rodney Fields, or Assesi Valahi, I do think that there's a number of things that we can do in the first couple of weeks to make things more difficult on our opposition. But the only way we can pull that off is with the athleticism, with the upgrade in talent, with the upgrades in speed. But we have that. And yes, Haas Haney, no matter what happens, right now, he's still the second fastest player on the Oklahoma State roster, which would put him at the upper percentile for the fastest players in the country, point blank period, at any position.
It doesn't sound like the Tennessee Titans are going to play Cam Ward any more than they did last week, and I think that's a big mistake.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast.
Cam Ward needs to play more. I'm already upset. I don't understand why we can't learn. I don't understand why things can't get better. So Brian Callahan said on Wednesday that he expects everybody to play about the same amount that they did last week. Expect 2 series from the offense. Expect 1 series from the defense. And Cam Ward is obviously the center of the discussion because his development and his readiness is most important. But this isn't just hey, Cam Ward needs to play more. This is for everybody. Like, what happened to the old school way of handling the preseason where you played your least amount in the first game? You played, back when they had 4 preseason games, you didn't play it all in the first game. And then you played a couple of drives, half of a quarter. And then you played about 3 or 4 drives. And then the last preseason game of the year, people used to play an entire first half. That's not going to happen here. And last year, I remember I remember the Tennessee Titans offense acting like they checked boxes and they were ready to go and they were following this limited plan. I'm sorry, I think it's crap. And especially, look, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles, if you're the Chiefs, if you're the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, the Detroit Lions, and you only want to play your guys a couple series each preseason game, maybe not at all right, I get it. You've earned that right. You're good to go. But the Tennessee Titans, who went 3-14 and have one of the youngest rosters in the entire NFL, they cannot afford to treat these preseason games like they're a playoff team. Cam Ward is a rookie. A lot of the players that have to step up, not only on offense, but on defense as well, are young players. So I just hate this that Cam Ward's going to play the same amount that he played last week. He should be ramping up, not two series. And again, no matter what happens on those series, he's playing 2 series. What if they go 3 and out twice against the backup Atlanta Falcons defense? Like, I'm sorry, but to be ironclad and only have Cam Ward play 2 series in this game, I think is a massive mistake from Brian Callahan, who needs to get this team ready to go. And this team is not ready to go. He even said that himself on Thursday. No, the team's not ready to go. He said he doesn't think anybody's ready to go. But I'm sorry, a team like the Eagles or the Chiefs or the Ravens or the Bills are the best teams in the NFL. They probably are more ready to go than you are ready to go, Brian Callahan. And to make up that gap, you need to play them more. Cam Ward should be playing more than 2 series in this game. He should be playing at least 3 drives, maybe even 4. Depending on how late. I don't want him playing in the second half of the second quarter. But 3 drives, why aren't we ramping up towards the season? Why are we stagnant? And the defensive side of the ball, don't even get me going on that. After the way the defense played against Tampa Bay, second-string offense last week, and then the way the defense got absolutely cut up in practice against the Falcons, you're only going to let the starting defense play 1 series? Like, Callahan's not getting this team ready to go. It's frustrating. And no Jeffrey Simmons, no Kevin Zeitler. And I pushed back against that last week too. I don't care if Jeffrey Simmons is a successful, qualified player in the NFL. I don't care if Kevin Zeitler's 35. The offensive line needs to play together. They need to gel together. The defense needs to be fully out there and play together to get ready. They go to Denver week 1. They play the Rams week 2. They play the Texans week 4. They're staring down the barrel of 1-3. Like, this could get ugly. This team has to be on its best behavior to start the season if they want to give themselves any hope and any semblance of a chance to compete, which is what they need in the locker room. I talked about earlier this week how I think this team could lose confidence quickly if they don't perform in the joint practices, which it's been up and down. If they come out in the preseason games, and even if the results don't matter, they're getting shellacked. The first-team defense isn't looking good. The second-string offense of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is driving down the field at will on both drives. Cam Ward has a 3 and out. I just think it's clear that this team is not ready to come out and throw out a good first punch. We've been talking about slow starts all week because of the joint practices. If the Titans start the season slow after being 3-14 with a guy like Brian Callahan, who probably isn't the best motivator, just personality-wise, I think things could go bad quickly. So I hate this plan from Brian Callahan. I think that Cam Ward should be playing more. The defensive starters should be playing more. Zeitler and Simmons should be out there playing. Now, as for my expectations for Cam Ward, I want no bonehead plays. None of these sideline throwaway things like what got picked against the Falcons on Wednesday or almost got picked against the Buccaneers on the 3rd down to start the first drive. No bonehead throws. You got to get better. Improve. But other than that, some of the stuff that we talked about last week, clean operation. Clean operation. No pre-snap penalties, no false starts, no illegal formation, illegal motion, just clean operation. So no boneheaded plays, clean operation. And I want to see Cam have a faster start. I want to see him be calmer early. We talked about that third down. Brian Callahan said that Cam Ward got off the read a little too quick. There was a little bit of a stunt. I broke it down in my offensive line breakdown, which came out earlier today. There was a little bit of a stunt. Cam Ward got a little bit of happy feet, left a good pocket a little too early. I want to see him be calmer to start the game, since this isn't his first NFL action anymore. That happened in preseason last week. So no boneheaded plays, clean operation from the offense, and a calmer, faster start for Cam Ward. That's what I'm looking for.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endlessly scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Well, Gametime's zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
What position battles are still unsettled at the midway point of Texas camp? We'll dive in.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns.
There are a number of position battles that are still going on, and today we're going to focus on 4 of them that have yet to be decided. Again, we are 16 days away from Texas and Ohio State. That's right. 2 weeks from Saturday, we'll get to watch Longhorn football again, and that is a beautiful thing. We've got 2 on offense and 2 on defense. We'll start with the defensive side of the ball, and we'll begin with the nickel position, the star position in Pete Kwiatkowski's defense. One of the most interesting storylines of fall camp has been Michael Taaffe getting a lot of work at nickel. Of course, Taaffe started every game for the Texas defense in 2024, but he started every game at safety, and he was one of the best in America at that position. He's still been getting plenty of reps at safety, but with the return of Derek Williams Jr. and the rise of Jelani McDonald, that has allowed Pete Kwiatkowski to cross-train Michael Taaffe and put him at some other spots on the field. In last Saturday's scrimmage, the first of fall camp, Michael Taaffe, unsurprisingly, was out there with the number 1 defense, but maybe surprisingly, he was the starting nickel, and it was Derek Williams and Jelani McDonald working at safety. There's another fall scrimmage coming up this weekend. Are we going to see that again? That is something to monitor. Now, it's not just Michael Taaffe. The aforementioned Jelani McDonald has been getting some run at star as well. So maybe Texas is going to have some packages where Taaffe is at nickel and McDonald is at safety, and some the other way around. But yeah, Michael Taaffe, could he end up being this team's starting nickel? Does PK feel like that gives his defense the best chance to be successful against the high-powered Ohio State offense? Yeah, they've got a new quarterback. Yeah, they've got a couple of new running backs and some new offensive line. They're still going to be really, really good. So you wonder about that, but you also wonder where Grayson Littleton and Wardell Mack fit in the equation. I mean, Littleton has been the top freshman so far for Texas, and honestly, maybe the top storyline for the entire team in the first 2.5 weeks of fall camp. He's been incredible, and he's gotten a ton of work with the first team defense. So is he still competing for a starting job? Could he really win a starting job on what could be the deepest secondary in all of college football? Something to monitor. We played the cut from Manny Muhammad last week praising Grayson Littleton. Everyone's been praising Grayson Littleton, coaches and players alike. That guy has burst on the scene during his first training camp at Texas. And again, getting reps with the number 1 defense is hard anywhere, but especially hard with all of the talent that Texas has. Could he be the starting nickel? And then Michael Taaffe moves back to safety. We'll see. Wardell Mack in his second year, he's also been really good too. So how many snaps does he get? Where does he fit in that nickel rotation? Something to watch. Who's the starter there? What does the rotation look like? That's position battle number one. And we're kind of crying from a yacht here. It's not like, oh, Texas doesn't have anybody good enough to play that position. It's like, well, they got 3 or 4 guys who might be good enough to play there. So what do they end up doing? That's number one. Number two, we're going to stick with the defense here with this one, and we're going to stick with the secondary, the corner opposite Manny Muhammad. We know Manny Muhammad is one of those starting cornerback spots locked down. There's no mystery there at all. He's earned that with his play over the last 2 seasons. But the other cornerback, not quite as cut and dry. You've got Jalen Gilbo, who, of course, is making the Jahdae Barron move, going from star to outside corner. He's the leader in the clubhouse. Obviously, you're hoping Jalen Gilbo can be the second coming of Jahdae Barron. Barron won the Thorpe Award, ended up as a first-round pick. That position change worked out really well for him. It worked out really well for the Texas defense, too. So Jalen Gilbo, whether he's Jahdae Barron or not, he's probably the favorite. He's been with the number ones more often than not, including in last weekend's scrimmage. But Kobe Black is there, too, and he's fighting. And he's really good. And he's taken a lot of strides dating back to the spring, over the summer, and now into fall camp as well. If he keeps taking those steps, there is perhaps a realistic path for him to be a starter on this defense. Now, he's going to play either way. The loser of this second quarterback competition is going to be the first corner off the bench, and they're going to be a significant part in this secondary. But Kobe Black fighting for some starting reps. I think Gilbo is going to be out there for the first snaps against Ohio State. But how many snaps Black gets maybe depends on how he performs in the latter half of fall camp. And again, I think there is a realistic path to where he can be this team's number 2 corner. Think about the receivers that Ohio State has, obviously with Jeremiah Smith, but Carnell Tate is back from a year ago. Brandon Inniss, a former 5-star. I mean, it's Ohio State. They can lose 2 or 3 5-star receivers to the NFL every year. They're still going to have 2, 3, 4, 5 waiting in the wings. So whoever wins that job is obviously going to be faced with a tall task in week 1. That's an important position battle to watch. Again, I think Gilbo's really good. I think Kobe Black's really good. Which of those guys emerges as the true number 2 corner? Now moving over to the offense, let's talk about the backup quarterback battle. I know we're talking about backups here, not quite as intriguing as the 2 we just looked at, but backup quarterback at Texas is always important. Texas doesn't get to the SEC title game without Arch Manning last year. Texas doesn't get to and win the Big 12 title in 2023 without Malik Murphy starting a couple of conference games that season. And you could go back way further than that. I mean, it's incredibly rare for a Longhorn starting quarterback to stay healthy throughout an entire season. Of course, we hope that happens with Arch, and I'll knock on wood to do my part that it does, but history tells you that it probably won't, because it usually doesn't here in Austin. So the backup quarterback is important, and this competition is important. And we're still trying to figure out who QB2 is. We've spent some time talking about the Troy transfer, Matthew Caldwell, and how good of a job he's done as a player, but also as a leader, a guy who came in after the spring. He's the new guy in that locker room. Trey Owens has been there for a couple of years. Sometimes can be tough as a new player to kind of command leadership and get everybody to respect you. Sounds like Matthew Caldwell has done a really good job of that so far. Again, the play has been solid, but also the leadership has been there too. Talking about a guy who's been now at 4 different colleges and a guy who has a ton of experience under his belt. He is commanding the respect of those other dudes in that Longhorn locker room, and he's come in here and raised the bar for both Trey Owens and KJ Lacey. And the good news is those guys have responded in a positive manner. Competition breeds excellence. This competition is bringing out the best in that Texas quarterback room. I'm excited about the future of KJ Lacey. I feel like I'm yelling. I don't know why I'm yelling. But this is a 2-horse race for QB2 between Caldwell and Trey Owens. In scrimmage number 1, Matthew Caldwell led drives of 13 and 16 plays. It's pretty good. Trey Owens was also responsible for the lone turnover that the Texas offense had last week. So perhaps advantage Caldwell after that first scrimmage. It's definitely too early to declare a winner. And honestly, I don't know when we're going to find out who wins this. Like when the first depth chart comes out game week, there may be an or between Caldwell and Owens' name. So we might not really know who won until one of those guys comes into a game first. Hopefully, Texas has a 3-touchdown lead in the fourth quarter against Ohio State and they could take Arch out. That's the dream scenario right there. But maybe Sark will give us an answer. Maybe the depth chart will tell the story. Maybe someone will ask and he'll give a clear-cut answer leading up to the first game. But as of right now, that is an important battle that has yet to be decided. So these next couple of scrimmages will be huge for those QBs. And last but not least, number 4, I went back and forth on this one. Defensive tackle is one worth watching. The battle for RB2 behind Trey Wisner is one worth watching. We've talked about those a lot. So I wanted to focus on a position that we haven't talked about as much, and that's tight end. Now, like quarterback, the starter has been decided, but the second tight end, I don't think has. And, unlike quarterback, 2 tight ends are going to be on the field at the same time a lot in this offense. You hope you don't see a lot of Matthew Caldwell or Trey Owens. You do hope, and you should plan on seeing a lot of multiple tight end looks for Texas this year. I mean, that's a staple of the Steve Sarkisian offense. He runs 11 personnel, 1 back and 1 tight end more than any other, but 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends is his second most utilized personnel package. At least it was last year. Jack Andrews is your starter. Again, no mystery there. I know he's new, but he's your best option by far. 56 catches, 623 yards, 2 touchdowns last year at Cal. All of the other tight ends have a combined 0 career college catches. So kind of obvious who number 1 is, but who's number 2? Who gets the nod in those 12 personnel sets? Is it Spencer Shannon, the 6'7", 252-pound redshirt sophomore? Is it Jordan Washington, the 6'4", 264-pound true sophomore, who apparently has put on 40 pounds since arriving on campus last year? Could it be Nick Townsend, the true freshman? Didn't enroll early, so maybe he's a bit behind the 8 ball, but sounds like he's off to a pretty good start. Amari Winston would have been another name that I mentioned. He's hurt right now, dealing with a shoulder injury. Sounds like that's going to bleed into the regular season. So as of this moment, I think he is out on the tight end 2 chatter. Maybe he re-enters the chat when he is fully healthy. I think Spencer Shannon, I keep using the leader in the clubhouse expression. I'll use it again. I think that's him right now. But Jordan Washington has been making a lot of noise in fall camp. He had a great first scrimmage. Folks have been raving about his after-catch ability. Sounds like he was the best tight end altogether in Texas's first scrimmage. And, it's interesting. In the first half, it was Andrews and Shannon working with the number 1 offense. In the second half, it was Andrews and Washington running with the first team offense. So is it Spencer Shannon? Is it Jordan Washington? Do we see both of those guys plus Jack Andrews in Columbus 2 weeks from Saturday? That's something that I think is yet to be determined and will be over the next 16 days. So keep an eye out on that one too. All right. Would love to hear from y'all. Your thoughts on those 4 position battles. What do you think I missed? What else are you going to be paying close attention to over the last 2 weeks and change of camp?
August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. Perhaps you believe in the Green Bay Packers, that they would win Super Bowl 59, or maybe you have some division winner dark horses you'd like to parlay. Visit the FanDuel Sportsbook app and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game.
There's plenty of roster spots still up for grabs for the Seahawks. Which players have the most at stake?
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast.
We do expect the Seahawks are going to be playing Sam Darnold and quite a few of their starters for at least a series or 2 in this game to get their feet wet heading towards the regular season. With that said, it's still a preseason game, which really boils down to the battles for final roster spots. Kansas City's got that going on. Seattle certainly has got that going on. So who's got the most at stake in this game? And this isn't just for roster spots. It's also for practice squad consideration and roster spots on other teams. I've got 10 players here that I'm going to be watching most closely against Kansas City. And we'll switch things up. Usually offense goes first. Let's start on the defensive side of the football. And for me, the first name that jumps out, I'm going to be watching. Of course, we've talked a lot about Jared Ivey this week. I think Jared Ivey is in pretty good footing to make this roster. Of course, he's going to be a guy that I'm watching in this game. I love watching the way that he plays. But there's a couple of other defensive linemen for the Seahawks in the undrafted rookie ranks that have kind of come on as of late. And most notably, it's been number 70, J.R. Singleton. And this was a player when the Seahawks announced their undrafted rookie class. I was really intrigued by Singleton when I went in and watched some Iowa State tape. The Cyclones were really good last year. They had a number of players who got drafted in the NFL draft. Singleton, obviously not one of them, but he was an all Big 12 caliber player at Iowa State, had some pass rushing production, had good numbers in the backfield. And you're starting to see that now show up for him in these practices. And he's been feeding off of playing next to Jared Ivey. Those two are really building a symbiotic relationship up front in terms of knowing what the other's going to do and having chemistry. Those two guys have been going and making plays a lot when they are on the field together. And Singleton had a decent game against the Raiders last week. This is another really good opportunity for him. I think he's a practice squad guy, but this is a great opportunity for him to secure that opportunity in Seattle and potentially be a guy that can make some contributions, maybe even later this year for the Seahawks if they need depth along the defensive line. The same can be said for Anthony Campbell coming out of Miami. Now, unlike Singleton, this is a player at a college level. The stats don't match the physical ability that you would expect from Campbell. He did not have good pass rushing numbers. This is not a guy that had many tackles at the college level, and yet he is a specimen. He is a physical freak. He looks like a defensive end instead of a defensive tackle. Really well cut, high muscle density. We're starting to see the physical tools translate into production and practice. He has dominated one-on-ones the last couple padded practices Seattle has had, and he has really started to shine getting into the backfield and making plays. Talk about a wild card. Again, not a guy that had much production in college, didn't play a lot of snaps in Miami, but when you turn on the tape, there are little flashes, and now we're starting to see that show up. So I think he's another one. Right now, he's playing for a practice squad spot, but I think both these players could potentially be players the Seahawks bring back, especially if they have really good finishes to the preseason. They're going to get a lot of snaps against Kansas City. This is a really good dress rehearsal for both of them. Moving away from the defensive line, Jamie Sheriff, this is an incredibly important game for him, and I'm just hoping he's going to be out there. I would think he's going to be. He practiced in the padded practice a couple days ago. He practiced the day after. I think he's over whatever minor injury that he was nursing, but this is a crucial game for him because he's making that transition from being just an off-ball, or not an off-ball, a edge defender, and then moving to the off-ball position that he had never played at any level previously. He's trying to become that hybrid do-it-all linebacker that Mike Macdonald likes to have in the back end of his roster, but we didn't get to see him play against the Raiders last week. We don't know what he's going to look like against another team in that off-ball role. So if he wants to be on the 53, he's got to go out and he's got to play at a really high level. There's certainly room for him to go get that with the depth concern Seattle has at off-ball linebacker right now, but he's got to go prove it against other competition. He's still going to get some reps rushing off the edge as well. Certainly a name that I'm going to be watching closely in this game. And then in the secondary, two different players here in terms of what they're fighting for. I expect that Shaquille Griffin is going to be on this roster with the guaranteed money that the Seahawks paid him, but he's missed most of training camp. We just finally got to see him for a couple days playing some snaps with the second team defense, had a nice pass breakup during the 7-on-7 period yesterday. So we're starting to see him make some plays, but he got here so late in the process. Josh Jobe, you can interpret Adam Durde's comments however you want, but he's had a really good training camp. He played well in the preseason opener, albeit getting lucky with that arm punt that he turned into an interception when the receiver had a couple steps on him. I think other than that, he has played pretty darn well. But this is very much an opportunity for Shaquille Griffin. I'm expecting he's going to get a handful of plays. He still only had a few practices under his belt, so Seattle's not going to throw him out there to have him play 35 snaps. That's not going to happen. But I expect to see him out there some as he's getting used to playing in this defense. And it is a chance for him to show that he deserves to be on this roster and be a guy that's in contention to get some snaps on defense for the Seahawks in his second stint with the team. And Jarek Reed, the second, he had a really good week. He's kind of one of those players that was starting to fall off the map a little bit in terms of making the roster. And just when you're ready to move on, he goes out and starts making plays. And you remember what he did before his ACL injury. Tyakata had kind of a rough game last week against the Raiders. Jarek Reed, whether or not it was his fault or not, there was a long touchdown where he was the safety on that side. I want to see him come out and play at a higher level here and really grab the bull by the horns and say, look, I'm one of the best special teams players. I can also contribute on defense if I'm needed, and I'm worth keeping a fifth safety. I want to see him go out there and earn that spot. As for the offensive side of the football, I don't feel like there's as many bubble spots that are necessarily up for grabs. Oddly enough, the offense, you've got starting jobs that are still being debated. But for me, Jacardia Wright coming off that really good preseason debut, he is not making this roster unless there's an injury in front of him. But this is very much another chance for him to show he could play for another team or he could be on the practice squad for the Seahawks. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I think he is on the bubble here because of Torrey Horton's emergence. I expect to see a lot of number one out there with the starters and maybe playing a little bit after that point because there's the possibility Seattle is considering moving on there. I think Ricky White III is building some momentum as well. I don't know if it's enough for him to make this football team now, but I do want to see what number 86 can do. He had a touchdown at the end of practice yesterday. He's a player that seems like he's coming through with more contributions with the third team offense, got a few second team reps this week. Feels like he's still at a difficult juncture here in terms of getting a spot in the 53, but now he can secure a practice squad spot. And we know the Seahawks have used practice squad receivers regularly, calling them up. The opportunity for him to still contribute this year for the Seahawks is very much there. And on the offensive line, two names that I'm going to be keeping close tabs on, different draft classes, but Mason Richmond, Christian Haynes, different reasons. Mason Richmond, I'm hoping we see him at the center position because he has been getting some snaps there this week. Mike McDonald, I asked him after practice yesterday if it would be possible to see him play some center in this game, considering he's only played a few practices, and he said short answer, yes. So I'm looking forward to seeing if we see some Mason Richmond at that center position and if he can play like he did the last couple of practices where there were some quality plays where you can see why the Seahawks made that move. And as for Christian Haynes, I don't think he's in the race for that right guard spot anymore. I've said it a bunch on this show. I think Anthony Bradford has won that starting job. Now Christian Haynes is fighting for his role on the roster, in my opinion. I think he makes this team, but he needs to go out and have a really good preseason game. Whether he's playing right guard or left guard, it seems like that ship at center, at least for now, has sailed. So he's probably just going to be playing exclusively those two guard spots. But he has to show that he is that number 3 guard for this team. And if they have questions whether he is that guy or not coming out of these preseason games, that may put his spot in a little bit of a tenuous position. So I think this is a big game for Christian Haynes, even if he isn't necessarily in the mix anymore to win the right guard starting job.
We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% with their killer last-minute deals. Tired of endlessly scrolling, trying to find the best deal? Well, Gametime's zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. No hidden fees. Take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed.
And another roster move. We dig into the details coming up after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast.
Bucks have signed Amir Coffey. he is a name. I think you probably brought him up quite frequently earlier in the offseason in terms of like low key targets for the Bucks. We were talking earlier, recording this morning with Ty of the Euro step, and we both pointed out, the obvious of like, well, I feel good about the depth that this team has overall, but depth on the wing, like who's going to play the three? That's the one spot that you're really unsure about, and enter Amir Coffey. So I say there's a caveat. That is, as first reported by Eric Name, it's a camp deal for Amir Coffey. So it's not necessarily a contract. That being said, I have a hard time seeing a Bucks roster without Amir Coffey on it. And I think this essentially buys them some time to figure out, how do we create that 15th roster spot and at whose expense is it going to be? Because with the camp deals, you're allowed to carry like 19 players, something like much more than your 15 throughout training camp. So that's what this does. It gives the Bucks that ability to, okay, we're going to stash him and we got him and can kind of bring him along. We'll see him in the preseason. We'll see him throughout camp. I just don't see, unless Amir Coffey's shot is broken and he has massively regressed since we last saw him, I don't see any scenario where he is not the 15th man on the roster.
Yeah, honestly, I'm surprised the Bucks even signed him to a camp deal. Like, Coffey is somebody who I thought would just get a straight up, maybe a vet man. Yeah, a standard deal, maybe a vet man at this point in the offseason, but surprised that he's a camp body. But yeah, like I like the signing a lot. Like, he doesn't necessarily fit into that really young age group of players we've been talking about, nor is he that older vet. 28 years old. He's just like a solid player. Like, that's the way I'll say it. He's a solid player. 6'7", shot like 41% from three last season. So he's someone who can knock shots down, play a bit of defense. I think some might overvalue his defense a little bit, but he has the tools. He's not going to be somebody who's a super weak link on the team on that side of the ball. So like, yeah, that's pick up I like. Like, you were naming off free agents a few weeks ago. Someone in the comments mentioned remembering this conversation where Amir Coffey was the only name of the ones you listed where I was like, I could get down with that. Like, that's more the speed I'm looking for. So I'm happy it's another wing player, someone with some size, 6'7", like I mentioned before, because a lot of the guys we've talked about being in the rotation are the smaller guards, especially when you're rolling out like the Kevin Porter Jr., Gary Trent Jr., AJ Green lineups where you're a little small. So having another option for a wing player that has some size is nice. If, of course, he does make it off of this camp deal onto a standard deal, which I would think is pretty likely based on what we've seen from him in the past.
Yeah, you mentioned the figures from last year and his numbers, and really there's, for the most part, he's been a very good to consistent 3-point shooter. He's a career 38% 3-point shooter, and the 2 years that were his leanest, he shot 28% and 32%. Those were, for all intents and purposes, the seasons that he played the least. He shot 32% his rookie year when he just played 18 games and took about 1 3 per game, and he shot 28% 2 seasons ago when he played 50 games and took less than 1 3 per game. Otherwise, as you noted, 41% last year, 38% the year prior to that, 38% the year prior to his 28% season, and then 41% in his second year in the league. So he's been a consistent 3-point shooter. He takes about 3 per game in limited minutes. He averages 18 minutes a game throughout his career, and ideally, that's probably the minute total you'd be looking at in a Bucks uniform for Amir Coffey. But it not only the shooting, the biggest part, he's 6'7", and I don't know what his wingspan is, but that was a big discussion that we had. Not only with Ty, you and I talked about it too. You got depth, but you got a lot of guys that we anticipate to play the 3 for the Bucks who are 6'4". Not that it's a bad thing. You just love a little more size.
Like having the options. Like, sometimes you're going to need a little bit more size. Sometimes you can get away with the smaller lineups. Like we discussed, I think last week, somewhere in there, time is a blur with all of the stuff that's been going on this week with the flooding. But I think that we talked about the fact that when you're looking at size, and you and Ty talked about it as well, before it was Boston, like you need to make sure you have the wings to match up with Boston because they had Tatum, they had Brown, they just had options they could throw at you. But when you look around the East and like the size of guys, you don't necessarily need to have those big wings all the time. But when you do come up in those matches, maybe with some Western Conference teams as well along the way, or just certain lineups, being able to have the versatility to throw out a bigger wing is going to be really helpful. And if you want to get super small, I wouldn't say I put Amir Coffey in the role of a small ball four, but they have guys on the roster who makes sense as like a small ball four, from trying out the Kuz thing, which we heard last year when he was brought on as someone who might help unlock Giannis at the 5 lineups, which are another change of pace for the Bucks. So yeah, I like the Coffey pickup if he makes it to the regular roster. The question is, again, I think attention turns to Andre Jackson Jr.'s contract. And what does this mean for him necessarily? Because we know they pushed that extend date back or guarantee date back on that contract. And then you pick up somebody like Amir Coffey, who last year proved to be a really decent role player who can do a lot of the things the Bucks are looking for a role player to do. So camp is going to be interesting. There are going to be some stakes there.
Amir Coffey, as it has been pointed out in the comments, has a 6'7", 6'7.5" wingspan. So similar to a couple of guys that we've talked about on this Bucks team. And that's about the same as we've seen for AJ Green, who I think is 6'7". He's 6'4" with a 6'7" wingspan. Gary Trent Jr. actually has a 6'9" or a 6'10" wingspan. That's why you've seen the Bucks able to kind of play with he and AJ for the shooting and that purpose as well. But you do at least get the size from Amir Coffey throughout camp, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But I think we're both aligned here. I think Amir Coffey is on this team when the season opens up, as we'll get to with the schedule. The last thing, you mentioned Andre Jackson Jr. Is it just him we should be circling and keeping an eye on, or is there potentially somebody else on the roster that, you know, may be sacrificed for Amir Coffey?
I mean, when you think about it, like, it wouldn't be smart to just say, like, yeah, it's only Ajax that could be an option, because we've seen John Horst do some things too along the way where you're like, I didn't foresee this move coming, or I didn't think you could pull this off. So who knows exactly what that looks like. But I think I point to Ajax first as the person to look at, just because of the contract situation, and the ease it is to get from underneath that contract at the moment. I mean, I know we had a conversation too with Frank a few weeks ago about maybe Tyler Smith is that guy in the roster who the Bucks move on for. But I think because the Bucks have seen more from Andre Jackson Jr., that they might have a more definitive opinion about what he might be, and be more willing to part ways with him than a Tyler Smith at this point. But again, this is all just us guessing at the moment. You know, we have to see how things play off when training camp actually starts.
Yeah, we already talked about it, but I think it's, even for all the valid criticisms and questions and or concerns you could have, I think it's too early to move on from Tyler Smith. If it weren't for the fact that you literally just re-signed him less than a month ago, I think there's another interesting name you would look at and say, well, realistically, this guy is going to be playing and asked to play the same role as Amir Coffey. And I think we all feel more comfortable with Amir Coffey, but just re-signing him, and as you alluded to, it's easier to get out of Ajax's contract for the partial guarantee. That I think that's kind of where we're headed, but we shall see. And that's going to be one of the more interesting things to monitor throughout training camp now, is the future of Amir Coffey and a couple of position battles for this Bucks team.